Gentle, whimsical intro music fades in and then softens to a background hum. Hello and welcome. Today, I'd like to share a story that has warmed hearts for generations. A classic fairy tale about kindness, mystery, and a little bit of magic. It's called The Two Little Elves. So find a cozy spot, relax, and let's begin. Once upon a time, in a small, humble cottage, lived a poor shoemaker and his wife. He was a good man and worked diligently every single day, but luck just never seemed to be on his side. No matter how hard he toiled, he could never quite earn enough to make ends meet. His tools were worn and his supplies were dwindling. One evening, with a heavy sigh, he looked at the last piece of leather he owned. It was just a small scrap, barely enough for a single pair of shoes. He turned to his wife, his voice filled with worry. "My dear," he said, "this is all the leather we have left. It's only enough to make one more pair of shoes. If I can sell them tomorrow, perhaps we'll have enough for a small meal." His heart was heavy, but he refused to give up hope entirely. With great care, he took his sharpest knife and cut the leather, shaping the pieces for a simple pair of shoes. He laid them out neatly on his workbench, ready to be stitched in the morning. Feeling exhausted and a little defeated, he said his prayers, left the workshop, and went to bed, hoping for a better day. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window. The shoemaker rose, stretched, and walked into his workshop. But when he looked at his workbench, he stopped in his tracks and gasped. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he must still be dreaming. There, on the table, stood a pair of shoes. But they weren't just any shoes. They were perfect. The leather was polished to a brilliant shine, and every single stitch was so neat, so fine, it looked like the work of a master craftsman at the peak of his skill. It was simply astonishing. He picked them up, turning them over and over in his hands, completely amazed. Before he could even fully process what had happened, the bell on his shop door jingled. A well-dressed customer came in, saw the shoes on the counter, and his eyes lit up. He tried them on, and they fit as if they were made just for him. "These are magnificent," he declared, and he was so impressed that he paid a very handsome price for them, far more than the shoemaker had ever dared to ask. The shoemaker was overjoyed. With the money, he not only had enough for a good meal for himself and his wife, but he could also go to the market and buy enough leather to make 2 more pairs of shoes. That evening, feeling a renewed sense of hope, he carefully cut out the leather for 2 pairs, just as he had done the night before. He left the pieces arranged on his workbench, wondering if the same miracle might happen again. Then he went to bed, his heart fluttering with anticipation. And sure enough, when morning came, he rushed to his workshop and found 2 pairs of exquisite shoes, beautifully finished and ready to be sold. The stitching was flawless, the design elegant. It was even more incredible than the first time. Soon, 2 more wealthy customers came by and eagerly bought the shoes, paying top price. This wonderful mystery continued night after night. Whatever leather the shoemaker cut out in the evening, he would find perfectly completed shoes by the dawn. His reputation grew, and customers from all over the region came to buy his fantastic footwear. The little shop, once quiet and struggling, was now bustling with activity. The shoemaker and his wife were no longer poor. They grew happier and richer with each passing day, their pantry always full and their spirits high. But as the weeks turned into months, their curiosity grew stronger. They were incredibly grateful for their good fortune, but they often whispered to each other, wondering who their secret helpers could be. Who could be so kind and so skillful? The wife would ask. And why do they help us in secret? The shoemaker would add. Finally, just before Christmas, they decided they had to know. Tonight, the shoemaker said, "We won't go to sleep. Let's hide and see who comes to do our work for us." His wife agreed wholeheartedly. So that evening, after leaving the cut leather on the table as usual, they didn't go to their bedroom. Instead, they hid behind a thick curtain in the corner of the workshop, leaving a candle lit so they could see. They waited quietly as the house grew silent. The old clock on the wall ticked slowly, and the minutes felt like hours. Then, just as the clock struck the magical hour of midnight, the workshop door creaked open ever so slightly, in tiptoed to tiny little elves. They were no bigger than dolls, and they were dressed in nothing but old, torn rags that were patched and tattered. Without a moment's hesitation, they hopped onto the workbench. With tiny, nimble fingers, they picked up the leather pieces. Their little hammers went tap-tap. Their needles flew in and out with incredible speed, and they worked with such focus and joy. The shoemaker and his wife watched in silent awe. The elves cut, stitched, and hammered with a skill that was simply breathtaking. Before they knew it, all the shoes were finished, lined up neatly in a row. Once the work was done, the two little elves looked at their handiwork, laughed with delight, and began to dance around the room. They leaped and twirled, celebrating their finished task before vanishing as quickly and quietly as they had appeared, disappearing into the night. The shoemaker and his wife slowly came out from behind the curtain, their hearts filled with wonder and gratitude. The wife whispered, her eyes shining with tears, "Oh, the dear little souls. They have made us so fortunate, but look at their clothes, they're all worn out and thin. They must be so cold in those rags. We simply must do something to thank them." The shoemaker nodded in agreement. "You're right," he said. "It's the least we can do for all their kindness." So the very next day, they set to work on a special project. The wife, with her skillful hands, sewed 2 perfect little coats, 2 pairs of tiny trousers, and knitted 2 warm pairs of stockings. The shoemaker, using his finest, softest leather, crafted 2 pairs of miniature shoes, complete with tiny buckles. They laid out the beautiful new outfits on the workbench that night, right where the leather usually went. Instead of work, they left a gift. Then they hid behind the curtain once more, eager to see the elves' reaction. At the stroke of midnight, the 2 elves appeared, ready to start their work. But when they hopped onto the table, they stopped. Their eyes grew wide as they saw the splendid little clothes laid out for them. They touched the soft fabric of the coats and the smooth leather of the shoes. Then they clapped their hands and giggled with pure, unadulterated joy. They quickly shed their old rags and put on their new outfits. The clothes fit perfectly. They looked at each other, admiring their fine new coats and sturdy little shoes. They were so happy, they began to dance and sing in their tiny, cheerful voices. They sang a little song. Now we're fine from head to toe, no more work, we're free to go. They danced and twirled all around the workshop, their hearts full of happiness. Then, with one last joyful leap, they danced right out the door and into the moonlit night. The shoemaker and his wife watched them go, their own hearts full. The little elves never came back again. Their work was done. But from that day forward, the shoemaker's shop never lacked for good fortune. He continued to be a wonderful craftsman, and he and his wife lived happily, prosperously, and kindly for the rest of their days, never forgetting the two little elves who had changed their lives forever. Gentle, warm outro music begins to swell. And that's the story of the Two Little Elves. It's a beautiful reminder that acts of kindness, no matter how small, can bring the greatest rewards, and that gratitude is a magic all its own. Thank you so much for listening today. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more tales. Until next time, take care and stay kind.